Welcome to the New Chemist podcast. We're so glad you're listening. Feel free to download this podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Odyssey, Stitcher, and a variety of other platforms. Here on the New Chemist, we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as other sciences' careers, community research, and other lectures in chemistry, and we analyze those lectures as well. My guest today is Dr. Campo. It is so good to have him as a guest today. He is the Associate Vice President and Head of Small Molecule Research and Development at Merck, a very established and accomplished scientist, having received numerous citations, patents, and multiple awards. He is currently a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. It's definitely a treat and an honor to have him as a guest today. Okay, so Dr. Campo, let's begin. What have been your long-standing interests in the field of science?
So, ever since I was a young kid, I was interested in sort of how things work. Asking tons of questions, trying to understand how the world works. I was also always interested in building things. I was one of those, obsessed with Lego kids.
Oh, yeah.
And in high school, I became really interested in sort of the biochemistry through one of my biology teachers who was sort of explaining how cells work and ultimately the chemistry of cells. And I became, or at least at the time, I thought I was really interested in biology, and I decided to pursue undergraduate studies in biopharmaceutical sciences. But I would say that I probably didn't realize that what I really liked about that high school biology class was actually the organic chemistry part of it. And I realized this when I was a second year undergraduate student, in organic chemistry in a class taught by Professor Louis Berriot at the University of Ottawa. And he really ignited something within me in terms of my interest in organic chemistry and the chemistry of carbon and sort of how you stitch these molecules together, and sort of started to introduce the concept of how these molecules could have an impact on the world. And ultimately, I decided to pursue graduate studies in large part because of my interest in organic chemistry, and I did a PhD in catalysis where I studied how late transition metals can catalyze reactions that would otherwise be impossible, and chemistry of palladium. And through that work, I became interested in sort of mechanistic understanding and the details of how reactions work. And ultimately, what happened was I realized that through an acquaintance of mine, someone in my network learned what process chemists do, and found that it was a phenomenal way to apply my strengths and things that I was really interested in to a problem that could have a really big impact on the world, and ultimately decided to join Merck as a process chemist a little over 15 years ago.
Okay, yeah. So how do you maintain vision and teamwork in your environment and your work environment at Merck as you work on these research projects? How are you maintaining the big ideas, the big picture, ideals of vision and teamwork? How do you maintain those?
So one of the things that I always found was really important is to link our work to the purpose that it is we're trying to accomplish. And I think we have sort of such a privileged position, as scientists in pharma, to be able to link the work that we do to ultimately improving human health. Like, we're literally changing the world one reaction at a time.
That's cool. That's cool.
and there aren't a lot of necessarily jobs out there where you can directly link what you do to a purpose. And I think that's a really important thing that I try to reinforce with my team. But I also think it's important to have broad interests. And so I think as scientists, it's really easy to get into this tiny little uber specific area of expertise, which is how the world works for science. But I've always thought it's really important to have broad interests. And I think for pharmaceutical development, again, because there are so many disciplines that have to come to bear to bring a drug to market, that's another way for me to sort of think about the bigger picture, is understanding what the biologists are doing and understanding what the chemical engineers in my team are doing, or understanding how medicinal chemists design molecules, and ultimately how our manufacturing colleagues are going to have to utilize the chemistry that we put in place, and our drug product colleagues that have to formulate the drug. So it's a tremendous privilege, I would say, for us to have that purpose, but also to have that opportunity to get that really broad set of stakeholders. And the last thing I'll say is because we're still doing cutting edge chemistry, we're very well connected and continue to contribute to the academic community as well. And that's another way to sort of broaden your interests and get the big picture.
Okay, wow, that's good. That's good. So, if you were advising or giving suggestions to someone who wanted to work in the same role that you're working in, as someone who deals with small molecule research and development, what would you say would be the toolkit or the degree that would give you the best chance of getting an opportunity to work at Merck?
So I think there's so many disciplines at Merck that contribute to developing small molecules, not to mention all the biologics and vaccines that we develop as well, that I think there isn't like a single discipline or a single degree. You know, specifically for my career path and being a process chemist, you know, advanced degree in synthetic organic chemistry was definitely a good way for me to get entry into the field. We hire a lot of chemists that we hire to solve really difficult problems. Most of them have graduate degrees, PhDs or masters, but we also hire chemical engineers. We hire analytical scientists. Some of our specialty groups have other disciplines like protein engineers or people who have experience in other types of engineering. So it's pretty broad. The biggest impact or I guess biggest opportunity to come to a place like Merck is really to leverage the network that you build throughout your studies, right? Whether it's through your undergraduate institution or through a graduate advisor, and really get to know people that work in the area that you're interested in. And then you'll really know what it's like to work there. And first, you'll know if it's a good fit for you, but that second, that can open doors to get the opportunity to interview.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good. So what would you say has been your most creative piece of work in the field of science, specifically on what you work on? And you can be as technical or as simple as you want to be. What would you say has been your most creative piece of work? Is it an elegant bond disconnection? Or,
yeah, I would say, you know, the longer you are in the job that I am, the less close to the science you are. But if I go all the way back, so what I would say is there's maybe a couple things. So maybe I'll split it by my graduate work versus my work at Merck. So when I was a graduate student, I had an insight that a certain type of electronic effect in the molecules that I was studying could be exploited to make a carbon-carbon bond that hadn't been known before, and that seed of an idea eventually became what we now call concerted metallation deprotonation, which is a well-accepted mechanism in palladium catalyzed direct arylation reactions. And it was, you know, I was 24 years old. I had this idea that, you know, CH acidity was going to be an important factor in these reactions, and that electron deficient arenes should work, which was not known at the time. And ultimately that ended up working, and my whole PhD ended up being about that. And I'm really proud of that work. I would say if I have to pick one thing that I'm the most proud of at Merck so far, there are two projects on which I made really important contributions. One of them is doravirine, which is an approved drug for HIV treatment, where I was able to design a synthesis of that molecule to really rapidly and quickly bring it into preclinical and clinical studies, and ultimately that drug was approved, and so I'm really proud of that. And then more recently, I actually led a cross-functional team that developed a cardiovascular drug that, you know, isn't on the market yet, so I can't really talk about it, but it was a cholesterol medication that's now going into phase 3 at Merck, and it was one of the first macrocyclic peptides that Merck synthesized and ultimately brought to market. And our team had to develop a bunch of extremely novel chemistry in order to be able to do that. So I can't wait to be able to tell the world about that in a couple of years.
Okay, that sounds really good. It's interesting that you worked on a HIV drug. You said an HIV drug. Yeah, yep. yeah. That's interesting because one of my mentors, I don't know if you're familiar with the name Lou Jungheim. Yeah, who worked on Nilprinavir. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So nice. It's definitely interesting. It's an interesting connection, interesting conversation. So small world in a way. So how have you sought or found the right environment for you to thrive scientifically and intellectually? How did you go about finding Merck, or did Merck find you? What process did you use to find this job or find this role or progress in your career?
So I think I would be kidding myself if I didn't think there's a tremendous amount of luck that goes into these types of things, right? So
Yeah, serendipity.
I was a undergrad at the University of Ottawa. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do long term, but I knew that I really loved organic chemistry and that I wanted to do something there. A friend of mine, who was sort of my lab partner, was like, "Hey, I'm going to go to grad school and I'm going to work with this guy, Keith Fanyu. He just started like this month. He's a brand new prof, but he's really cool and I want to work with him." So I went to meet with Keith and I said, "Hey, I think I want to go to grad school too." Like, I hadn't really thought this through yet. And we talked for about an hour and there was like a spark, like you meet these people and you're just like, wow, this person's awesome. I want to just spend time with this person. It's going to be great. So, he didn't have a lab. He didn't have, I didn't know anything about him. He was a tremendously successful graduate student, but at the time I wasn't in the know, right? So I joined this guy's lab and it ended up being, maybe the best 4 years professionally. It was just an amazing experience to work with him as a mentor. And through him, I learned a lot about pharmaceutical science and sort of the different places that people do process chemistry and med chem and what's the difference. And one of his close friends was a process chemist at Merck, and he would invite him every year to come and speak at the university and speak to the group. And so this guy, Greg Hughes, used to come and give these scientific talks, like, this is what we do and this is the impact that we have. And I was always tremendously inspired by that. And I met him and we eventually built a relationship. And so, 4 years later or 3.5 years later, when there was a position at Merck, he actually called and said, "Hey, there's a position, you should apply for it so that we can interview you and see if you're a good fit to come here." So, if you think about that progression that I just walked you through, I didn't talk about my accomplishments. I didn't talk about, obviously you got to deliver the science, but if I hadn't been in Keith's lab and if Keith's best friend hadn't been a process chemist at Merck, I doubt that I would have had the opportunity to interview. And I think sometimes we just have to lean into that, chance matters. And so that's why you need to know as many people as possible and you need to kind of cultivate that network, because I think it's really important. Yeah, but then once you interview, I always tell people, when you interview at a place, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you.
I agree.
You become the people that you work with. And so when you're interviewing there, if you meet people that you're like, wow, I hope one day I can do what that person does, then that's a great fit. And that's how I felt when I interviewed at Merck. I knew that I wanted to be a process chemist at Merck as soon as I met the people that worked there, the way that they thought about problems, the way they were really passionate about the impact they could have. And that has been true. And it's been true for the last 15 years, which is why I'm still here.
Wow, that's good. That's good. Wow, that's good. So, what would you say is complemented to your success so far? Yes, you said there's a degree of serendipity or chance, or whatever you want to phrase it. Who would you say has been one of your driving, encouragers, motivators, source of inspiration? What would you say has complemented your success? Can you name some of the people or talk about the people who really played a role outside of the ones you mentioned already?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say I like sort of your line of questioning here. I think the people really matter. I think your mindset matters a lot as well. So I've always been fascinated by ideas. I'm sort of creative by nature. I'm excited by new ideas and the prospect of doing something new. Okay. And I have probably more of an optimistic bend than a pessimistic bend. And scientists who are listening to this will know, you bring a new idea to someone and one person will say, well, that's definitely not going to work. You shouldn't do that. And then another person will say, wow, that's really cool. You should try that, And I've surrounded myself with people that are more on that side of the spectrum, people that are going to cheer you on when you have a cool idea that you want to try. And I would say, I already talked about Keith and about Greg, but when I was at Frost, one of my first mentors there was a guy named Stéphane Ouellette and a woman called Sarah Dolman, and they had been there 3 or 4 years, so they kind of knew the ropes, but they were really good at sort of encouraging me to try my ideas. I had a peer that just started at the time, this guy named Ernest Lee, who's now at Gilead, and I remember going into his office with a crazy idea and I drew it on the board and I was like, do you think this is going to work? Because nobody else thinks it's going to work. He's like, that's the coolest thing ever, you should try it. And then I went and I tried it and it worked, and it was like, if he'd have said no, he'd have been like the 5th person to tell me no, and then I probably would have said, okay, I'm not going to try this. And Keith used to say, you have to think of an idea long enough to convince yourself to try it, but not too long to convince yourself that it won't work. And I think that that's tremendous advice. I've had other mentors like that. You know, when I first moved to the US, I worked very closely with a mentor of mine, who's still my boss, Kevin Campos, who was the same way. I have a peer right now, another associate vice president, Becky Ruck, and I, that I've worked together for over 10 years, and she's like that too. So there's kind of this element of people that surround you that sort of ultimately make you better. And that's the only advice I'll leave you for this question is, I feel like I've thought a lot about how I can make others around me better, and ultimately that makes me better too, and then we're all better for it. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. You bring value to the space that you're in, and that value, it adds to you and to the others as well. Yeah, that's good. So how do you maintain a balanced life given all your responsibilities and accomplishments? Or let's phrase it differently. How do you maintain your priorities? How do you keep your priorities in check? How is your work-life integration? How do you maintain a sense of resilience when you face obstacles? We could phrase this, spin this question in a different way.
No, I like what you said. I like what you said. Work-life integration or work-life fit. I don't believe in work-life balance. I think balance implies that some of it is bad and some of it is good. Fit is about making sure that you get the most out of how you spend your time, regardless of whether that's work or not work.
Yeah.
What I would say is, this evolves over time, and as your responsibilities increase, this becomes more and more challenging. One of the things that I always tell people in my group is you have to have very clear boundaries for certain things. And for me, like, I'll give you an example. Really early on, when I had a very small family, when my wife and I first got together, and ultimately when we had our son, having dinner together every night was really important. And so there was never going to be a time where I would stay late at the lab just because I could and skip dinner or miss dinner with my family. And so, I'm the kind of person that leaves work so that I can get home and have dinner with my family. It doesn't mean that sometimes I don't get back on my computer later, or, when I was a graduate student, I'd go back to the lab after dinner. But that was sort of one of the imperative things that I wanted to do. And of course, things get in the way of that, like travel and whatever. But, it was one of those things. And I think over time, I got really good at figuring out what were those things that were really important to me, either because they brought me strength, they brought me joy, they helped me, sustain my passion. And those could be things that are within work as well. So I always tell people, like, find those things at work that you're really good at and that bring you a lot of energy, and make sure you do a little bit of that every day, because you could have a day filled with stuff that you're really not interested in for whatever reason that particular day, or it's a task that you're not particularly excited. But if you can find an hour or two in that day where you're going to do something that you're really passionate about, that you're really excited about, that's what's ultimately sustain you over time. And then you just got to be ruthless with your prioritization. And so you have to weed out the things that really don't drive a value proposition for you, whether that's a professional value proposition or a personal value proposition, And I would say that, again, I always tell people in my team, like, you're going to be asked to spend time on all kinds of things. And when people ask, they don't necessarily have the complete picture of what your day looks like or what your life looks like. And it's okay to say no, right? So spend the time on things that you're really good at and that drive a value proposition for whatever it is you're doing at that time, whether that's a company or whether that's your home life. And then be ruthless in your prioritization and just start cutting things out to create space for that. And I would say that that's been tremendously successful for me. I'm actually able to get more done in less time because I don't spend time on things that don't necessarily drive a lot of value, and that's really important.
That's very good. And that's the same reason why I enjoy podcasting so much, and enjoy having these conversations, as well as assisting with science education in the community that I serve in and serving as faculty. I completely agree with you. You summed it up well. So you also have a podcast, Farm to Table Podcast. So my question to you is, what led to you starting that? What has been how do you find time for all of this, Dr. Campbell? You have a family, you have a high-ranking job that's a lot of responsibilities, and you also have a podcast as well to put the icing on the cake. So how are you able to do all of this? So tell us.
This is actually a great segue, David, because we were just talking about like find the things in your life that bring you joy and dedicate time to it, right? And one of my strengths is communication. Like I get a lot of energy out of meeting new people, out of talking about stuff with people. Like if I have a day full of meetings where I'm meeting people one-on-one, I'll be really energized at the end of the day. Whereas if I have a day where I have to sit in my office and work on a document for 5 or 6 hours straight, or write a paper, or like I'm not interfacing with people, I'm completely drained of energy. And I realized this somewhere about 10 years ago. I sort of did a Clifton Strengths Finder assessment, and communication was number one. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I realized that some of our strengths are also needs. Right? So if you're really good at something, you probably need some of that in your life. And so I started thinking about ways that I could apply my strengths to things that would drive value for our company, right? And for my job. So one of those things was, well, okay, we have this audience, right, that we speak to at conferences, when we visit schools, that ultimately ends up being the recruiting pool for our talent, right? Graduate students at universities. But there's an infinite number of universities and an infinite number of graduate students. We can't reach them all. And in 2019, I was at a conference, and there was a speaker there, Randy Zuckerberg, who's actually Mark Zuckerberg's sister. And she's a marketing expert. And she says, like, you know, podcasting is really taken off in the last few years, but there's this sort of gap for subject matter expert podcasts. For like, you know, if you're an organic synthetic chemist and you want to talk about organic synthetic chemistry, there's probably not a lot of podcasts about that. And I sort of had that on the back of my mind, like, hey, maybe we could do that. It would play to my strengths. It could allow us to reach an audience. And then the pandemic happened, right? And then we all got sent home. We had a bunch of interns that were coming for the summer, which usually would work in our laboratories, but we weren't going to be able to do that during the pandemic. And so one of the ideas we had was to start a podcast and work with an intern to sort of pilot what that would look like and have them do some of the editing and sort of lead the effort. But, you know, I would be the host, and started reading about podcasting and sort of decided that having a co-host in my case was going to be the right fit for me. And so I approached Danny Schultz, who's a member of my team, and I was like, hey, you know, I love talking to you all the time. We always have great conversations. Why don't we record them? And that could be a podcast. And so we started messing around with that in 2020, and we weren't good at it at first. Like we sort of, you have the growing pains, the growing pains, right? But the general idea of that podcast is we pick a paper, usually a recent paper that our team has published, and we sit down with the key, either one or two of the scientists that contributed to that paper, and we try to get to the stories behind the paper, like, why did you do this work, and what are how does it link to what we do, and why is it important? Because when you read a paper, some of that stuff isn't necessarily written in there. So it's a cool way for, let's say, a graduate student to learn a little bit more about how we work. It's a great way for them to learn about the people that are in our organization that they may otherwise not get to meet or hear about. And so we launched summer 2021, so about a year after we started messing around with this as a side project. And then I think we found kind of our cadence. So like you do here, we have somewhat of a structure of, that we help people with preparing. We usually use a slide deck. And so, 4 or 5 slides just to kind of help anchor everyone. And then we tend to record in blocks. So we'll schedule, let's say 4 or 5, episodes worth of guests in a morning, and we'll do it all in one shot. And then we spend the next 3 or 4 months working on the editing and the production to get it out the door. So if you think about it, we usually have about 10 to 12 episodes a year. And so that's basically 3 half days worth of recording. And then after that, it's just sort of the, a few hours here and there to get everything buttoned up and launched. And so it ends up being not like a ton of work, but it is extra work. It's not like something I got to do for my job. We just decided to do it, but it ended up driving tremendous value. Like pretty much everybody who comes in interviews at Merck now says, hey, I heard the podcast and I learned about this paper that I probably wouldn't have learned about any other way. So it ended up being exactly what we wanted. But this all started from a place where I was like, I'm a really good communicator. I like talking to people. And if I could apply those skills to something that would drive value for my organization, that would be great. And then the pandemic happened and the intern thing lined up, and we just did it. So it's an example of sort of my philosophy in action, if you will.
Yeah, I completely agree. And same thing with me. Like my podcast started in August 2020.
Here you go.
Right when the pandemic started. It's amazing how the pandemic spurred creativity for many people. And then also
Absolutely.
I had the opportunity to interview people like the co-founder of Moderna, like professors at Harvard, the Broad Institute, like a variety of people, a Dr. Campo, by the way. So I've had a lot of opportunity to meet people and engage in meaningful dialogue, and the whole basis and structure of the podcast came from a book, Find Your Path, which is published by MIT Press, in terms of me reading through that and adopting the same method of inquiry for the podcast. So as we conclude, what advice would you give to those wanting to pursue the field you're currently working in? What would you tell someone if they came to you and said, I want to do what you're doing in the next 15 years, or I want to help the world in a similar way in the next 15 years?
Yeah.
How should I start? What would you tell an undergrad? What would you tell a grad student?
Yeah, so I think I would encourage undergrads to make sure that they have a passion for the science, because being a graduate student is difficult, right? There's a ton of failure, and sometimes you wonder, like, why did I decide to do this? It seems like I'm working a lot and I'm not making a lot of progress. But being a graduate student is all about overcoming that, right? It's about learning how to solve problems and realizing that, you don't go from point A to point B directly, that sometimes you have to take massive detours, and you have to be curious about the world, and you have to be curious about your science. And if you feel like you have that, then you should go to grad school. If you want to go to grad school just to get a job later, but you're not sure you're going to enjoy the process of struggling through the science, that doesn't set you up for success. So it needs to start from a place of genuine interest in wanting to understand some problem, some scientific problem, and then you go to grad school.
I agree.
And then the vast majority of pharma scientists, have some sort of graduate degree, and most, at least in chemistry groups, have PhDs. And then I think if you really want to take the next step into a pharma career in chemistry, then that really comes down to developing the network while you're in grad school. So many schools will have pharmaceutical scientists that visit on a regular basis, meeting those people, telling them about your accomplishments and your science, so that when and if there's a job opening, you're sort of on their list of people they would want to interview. Because the hard part is getting the interview. After that, it's all on you. You know what I mean? It's all about your accomplishments and how you're going to make others around you better, and what you're going to bring to that organization. But there's, again, an infinite number of people and an infinite number of locations, and so finding the right people to bring in for an interview can sometimes be challenging. But I always tell people, when I was a graduate student, Greg Hughes is one of my mentors. He was visiting, and someone was like, well, what do I got to do as a graduate student to get a job at Merck? And he replied, well, you just got to be awesome, which I thought was a really funny question. But his point was that when you interview, you're going to have to convince a group of people that you're the kind of person that's going to solve the most challenging problems that this company has on the table. And so we look for people that are great at solving problems. It's not like we look for subdisciplines of expertise. Like, that happens every once in a while. But generally speaking, scientists are extremely adaptable. And so if you're really good at learning something new and applying it in a way to solve problems, when you come here, we're going to teach you a bunch of new stuff, and you're going to solve a bunch of problems. And so that's what I tell people they need to be able to demonstrate in their interviews.
Okay, wow, that's good. It sounds like you are definitely moving forward and making lots of progress, and in my opinion, achieving your lambda marks. So reaching a point where you can transition from one energy state to another, or one level to another, and make an impact, or gain the maximum from your environment. Yes, that is what I would say. So what has been some of the most beneficial advice you have received, either from your parents or professors or family members or significant other? What would you say, something that replays in your mind when you really succeed and do tremendous and brings you back down in terms of humility? So or really helps you to pick yourself up from those rough days.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know if you want to put this in the category of advice, but I had a French literature teacher when I was in high school. We were reading this really old piece of French literature, and he was really excited about this one passage. And the passage went, in French, à vaincre sans péril, on triomphe sans gloire, which basically means, like, to be victorious without peril is to triumph without glory. And for whatever reason, so here I am, 16, 17 years old, I hear this for the first time. But this idea that you know, you're gonna, when you succeed, you're gonna look back on those tough moments and realize that having overcome that will only augment what you ultimately accomplished. That sense, that one line, which is like from whatever 16th century French literature, was really like, it makes the tough times harder, easier to get through, because you're sort of like, yeah, it's really tough right now. I'm trying to solve this problem and I don't know if I can solve it. But when I solve it, this is going to be so much greater. And I used to walk around the labs when I was a grad student and walk around the labs at Merck, and I used to tell people this quote, you know, like when they were like struggling with something. And I'm like, when you solve this problem, this is going to be even greater, right? Because you'll have overcome this adversity. And it reminds me of a quote that I recently heard in a movie about the guy who invented the Lamborghini. And he says, it isn't impossible until we fail. And if we fail, we'll fail searching for greatness. So it's kind of this similar vein of like, I just assume that we're going to get to the right place at the end. And that mindset is really important. It's important for scientists because most experiments that we run will fail, right?
Yes.
But ultimately, as a collective, as a group of scientists that come together to solve these problems in drug discovery and development, we often succeed in the end, as a group, right? Yeah. So I think that's probably, you know, it's not really advice because it came from like a book. I already told you about Keith's quote about you know, not convincing yourself not to do stuff. That's something I repeat all the time as well. Yeah. But to me, those two things are probably the most important things that I think people should take away from this conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember this book, Good Timber, as we conclude. Remember this quote from Good Timber, this poem. It said, "The tree that never had to fight for sun and sky and air and light, but stood out in the open plain and always got its share of rain, never became a forest king, but lived and died a scrubby thing. The man who never had to toil to gain and farm his patch of soil, who never had to win his share of sun and sky and light and air, never became a manly man, but lived and died as he began. Good timber does not grow in ease. The stronger winds, the stronger trees. The further the sky, the greater the length. The more the storm, the more the strength. By sun and cold, by rain and snow, in tree and men, good timbers grow." So yeah, Dr. Campo. Yeah. I said that in high school and it still replays in my mind. Yeah, as well as my faith perspective and faith tradition. But yeah, Dr. Campo, it's so good to have you as a guest. It was a privilege and an honor.
Oh man, thank you, Chase, for joining me today. Welcome to the new Student Pharmacist Podcast Experience. It is so good to have you listening in today. On this podcast, we discuss chemistry, pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy. We discuss successful athletes and people who are just succeeding and making an impact in society. We're so glad you're listening. Feel free to download this podcast on wherever you listen, Pandora, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the like. We are so glad to have you here. My guest today is Chase Griffin. Wow, this is amazing. So, I'll just read his bio and then we'll get started. Chase Griffin, the quarterback at UCLA, is a nationally recognized leader in the college name, image, likeness, athlete empowerment movement. He is a two-time winner of the National NIL Athlete and of the Year award, up by Bloomberg as the undisputed king of college endorsement deals. The Los Angeles Times as UCLA's magnetic marketer and name, image, likeness superstar by ESPN. Chase is a brand ambassador for JP Morgan Chase, American Eagle Outfitters, Degree, Unilever, Postmates, Uber, Shell, LegalZoom, Foot Locker champs, and the list continues. In addition to being 1-0 as a star in the iconic Rose Bowl Stadium, he is inspired by the rich tradition and legacy of the pioneering UCLA athletes who have come before him and is using his NIL for good. Professionally, Chase is the athlete creator in residence at Range Sports, Range Media Partners. He has his own newsletter, The Athletes Bureau. He's a student executive in residence at UWG, and he's a Togo Foundation Fellow. Chase is a prolific content creator and includes branded entertainment, music production, and social content. In terms of his academic accomplishments, he's earned a BA in Public Affairs, a Master's in Education and Transformative Coaching and Leadership, and will soon complete a Master's in Legal Studies at UCLA Law. He's definitely doing a lot. He's a recipient of the National Arthur Ashe Jr. Football Scholar of the Year Award. He has won numerous awards, very accomplished, very articulated. He's doing well. It's so glad to have him on the podcast today. So, Chase, let's get started. I have a question to you before I even get into all my questions. How do you manage all of this? How are you? What drives you? That's the first thing I want to know. What is driving you, so I can get a little piece of that and see apply it to my own career? What's driving you?
Well, first off, David, thank you for that amazing introduction, and thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here today, speaking to whoever's tuning in, whether they be in the medical field or not. As far as how I'm able to stay focused and how I'm able to stay engaged while doing the various activities that I focus on, it comes down to habits. And I grew up in a household where I've always loved sports, I've always loved music, but school was always first. And so by having habits of doing homework immediately when I got home from school, practicing violin, and then going to training, these are all things that I've been doing since I was 4 and 5 years old. And when you get to college, it's really less about being able to continue to do those. It's about not letting your newfound freedoms or not letting distractions take you off path. And so for me, I think I've done a pretty good job of keeping away from distractions. And
very good.
I've done a good job of finding the joy in everything. That way, even when I'm tired, even in times where I may have a lapse in focus, I'm able to lock back in and treat everything I'm doing, whether it be on the field, off the field, in the classroom, as the best thing that I'm doing that day. And I try to have fun with it and count it all joy.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, count it all joy, like the book of James. That's very good. Yeah, so what have been your long-standing interests in the fields of athletics and academics? So I see your career, but I want to hear what's your interest? What keeps you interested in this academic work?
So my undergrad was in public affairs, governance, and policy. I think when I look at my overall life goals, I want to build generational wealth early, and then I want to go into public service and philanthropy, wherever, I feel like I can make the bigger difference, and do all of that while maintaining my faith. Sports, that goes back a long time. My first sport was actually soccer. I grew up, really enjoying watching Ronaldinho.
Eto'o
play back when they were at Barcelona together. And that was my sport for around 5 or 6 years. And that's really where I learned how to train and how to dominate. But on Sundays, I always loved watching LaDainian Tomlinson score touchdowns. And so I always wanted to play football, but my parents told me that I couldn't until 5th grade. And so once 5th grade hit, that was my first season of quarterback. It was my first season of tackle football. And it was the match for me. I really fell in love with the position in the sport, and that's how I play. I've also always been interested in basketball. I think outside of watching UCLA film, I probably do basketball than I do football, especially in season, because when you're in season, football sort of becomes your job. So you don't want to spend, 10, 12 hours a day on something and then go home and watch other people do it. I'd rather watch a Lakers game. That way, when I come back to the facility in the morning, I feel refreshed and ready to lock in and ready to go.
I agree with that. Yeah, so it's interesting you said you learned how to train and dominate. What did that entail? Did that entail like your upbringing, or like, of course you spoke about your habits, but you said train and dominate. What did that entail in terms of developing that skill?
Well, my father's always expected a lot out of myself and my siblings.
I agree. Same here with me.
Right. Yeah, so you understand. And then my mother's a teacher. So when it came to school, there was really no way out of it. It wasn't like I could go to one parent and be like, they're being tough on me. It was like, no, the expectation is if you're not doing your homework, you're doing something wrong. And then even over the summers, I love video games. So before I could play video games, I had to read 50 pages and do my workbook. And that went all the way, through probably early middle school, early high school. And so I just, doing well in school, to me, is just synonymous to what I do. And so it's something that I take pride in. And I think when you have a priority set like that, it takes care of everything else. My number one priority is always my faith. And and then family, and then the business I gotta handle, whether it's football, whether it's school, or whether it's NIL, really in that order now.
Yeah, that's good. Same here with me, dude. Interestingly enough, like for me, I had an upbringing in which my father's a physician, my mom's a professor. So of course, academics is important. It's very important. But the thing I like about my upbringing is you had the liberty to choose what in that area you would do. But the expectation was set. You must do well. So yeah, that's good. So how do you maintain the view of the bigger picture in your career and in your life in general? So when you face challenges or face a struggle, I know you have so much articulations and accomplishments, but I don't know, you may have not, but you may have encountered some challenges or some struggles. How do you maintain view of your overarching goals when you face those types of things? What do you do?
For me, perspective is everything. And I think by nature, I'm an even keel person where, I never get too high, never get too low. And I think a lot of that stems from just how I view life in general. Okay. In the grand scheme of things, life is very short. And a lot of the things that we attribute, large amounts of value to don't really matter. Just frankly don't. And a lot of the accomplishments we have are by the grace of God. So I never feel like me accomplishing something or me being good at something is something I'm doing alone, let alone doing it by myself at all. So, this is something I've had to work at more and more throughout college. I was Gatorade Player of the Year my senior year in Texas, so I'm coming off being, in my opinion, the best player in the best state in the country as far as high school football goes. And then I'm not playing that year. I'm redshirting, and so that's a big shock to any 18-year-old who feels like they just made their best choice to get to the NFL. And if you can't see your dream in that moment, it's easy to get discouraged, and I did. And it's something that a lot of freshmen go through. But for me, it was about taking a step back, realizing what really mattered to me, realizing that there's things that I can control and there's things that I can't control. And as long as I lean into my faith, that it'll all work out, not just exactly how it should be, but even better than I could have planned it. I always tell people I'm not a big planner. I definitely have goals, and I have visions in mind that I think keep me on track as far as realizing the things that I do now will have consequences later, good and bad. But at the same time, I could never tell someone what I'll be doing in 10 years because I think that's hubris to think, a man can have plans, but the Lord actually guides the steps. So as long as I remain trusting in that, I know that I'll have peace however it ends up, and I'll continue giving myself the best shot to reach my goals.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And even for me, articulations, pedigree, accomplishments, they all, like you said, they're by God's grace. And the end game, the target, if your life was like a dart, the bullseye is to make sure that you give God glory, or you live a life that reflects Him, that you honor the people that you encounter. All of that plays out in your vocation, in your personal life, or whatever the case may be. So how have you been adaptive and creative in the field of public service? What do you do? I even saw, I did a little bit of Google searching, you basically fill up Google. I typed in your name. Yeah, you're doing so well. So I even saw you had cards and stuff like that. What do you do that's adaptive and creative in the field of public service?
So I grew up serving at the Round Serving Center, which is probably around 15, 20 minutes away from the house I grew up in. And then when I got to college, I wanted to find a way to continue doing that, especially with NIL, with my newfound platform, and just frankly, by earning money, I had an actual opportunity to give. And
that's very important.
I'm a Christian and I believe in tithing, so I've given a portion of all of my proceeds, and now I've personally donated over $40,000 to the LA Regional Food Bank. And through my platform, I'm honestly proud of the work that we've done to help others and bring more eyeballs to the program. And there's been folks from Bruin community, there's been folks from my community back home in Texas, there's been family members who have joined along with me to donate to a cause that I truly believe in.
Oh, this is good, man. I think I need to come and visit California. I know so many people there. I think I need to come and take a visit. So how have you sort of found the right environment for you to thrive athletically and intellectually? What do you do when you're determining which environment you can go to? How do you like sieve through or sort through? Because I know for people like yourself whom I can see and I can speak from my own personal experiences, sometimes it's not a matter of having opportunities, it's not an issue of having opportunities, but choosing the one that's the best fit for you. So what does that process look like for you, Jace?
I mean, it depends on the situation. So when it comes to NIL, I choose my opportunities based off a value system. I try to work with brands that align with me personally, and where the brand deal that they're offering me is economically correct and according to my market price, and something that I build community value, empower others with. When it comes to choosing UCLA, it came down to really two main things. Great school with amazing history, and particularly amongst the Black athletes who have come here and changed the world from this campus. And then, I believe that it gives me the opportunity to play big time enough football to go to the NFL. And I still have one more year of eligibility, and until that dream is gone, I'm going to continue working like that's the goal.
Okay, well, I wish you all the best in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, by God's grace. So, how do you maintain balance or good integration with all your responsibilities and accomplishments? What story or person has impacted you so that you can maintain these things? What story can you share that really speaks to you having a good integration, balance in your work life, in your fun life? I don't know how that looks like for you. Maybe more football, I don't know, or your accomplishments. What story can you share tell the audience that really speaks to you have in that area? Progress in that area.
I mean, I've had a number of amazing mentors that I'll continue to foster relationships with, but honestly, as far as folks that I really revere in that way or idolize, maybe that's too strong of a word, it really just comes down to my parents. Just how committed they are to me, how committed they are to my sister and my little brother. I think this showcases, one day I want to be a parent. And
same here.
Not anytime soon.
Yeah, me too. Same here. I think I'm moving slow on that one.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I know that all of this will be for something better than, what I feel like it wouldn't just be worth it if I was doing it all for me. So by having that in the back of my mind at all times, I know that the decisions I'm making are going to have consequences in my life, and all I can do is continue to control what I can control to put myself in the best situation. And I really have always revered my parents. There's never really, been a day, like everyone makes mistakes, but there's never been a day where I felt like, dang, like daddy or mama they don't care about me, or they're not committed to my upbringing or my success. And I think in that same way, when you're raised by people who believe in you that way, then you end up believing in yourself that way and making that commitment to yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with you completely. To have people who will support you and go with you to the nth degree, academic pursuits and your personal pursuits. Yeah, that's good. So, in terms of advice, what has been that you've received that's really impacted you, that's really made an impact in the way you operate? You can name a person or what they said or keep them anonymous. What has been some advice that has impacted you personally that you find echoing in your mind in those good days when you do so well and kind of helps you come back down to earth, or those hard days in which you have to pick yourself back up?
Right. For me, it's really been doing at least a verse a day every single morning. So a Bible verse. And so I wake up every single day, say my prayer, get to the facility, and then review a Bible verse every day. And what that does is it puts me in the right frame of mind and helps remind me what really matters. Like, when I have meetings and I have football and I have an event to go to or an event to speak at, those are all amazing, but sometimes it's hard to find the red thread in all of it. And you said it best earlier, like sometimes, well, at all times, it's really just about glorifying God and spreading love to others. What we do on a daily basis is just the medium for us to practice that. And you said that earlier, and I really resonated with that. I think by reviewing a verse every single morning puts me in the right wavelength, and it helps remind me that, every single thing I'm doing today is worth it if I'm practicing this advice right here.
I agree with you. And one of the things that comes from my faith perspective is that if you believe that God is leading you, you're being led in triumph. No matter how it looks in the moment, the end result is going to be victory, progress. What's been some of the most what advice would you give to those listening? So, like, say if someone sees you and they see all of the things that you've done, all the things that you are doing, what advice would you give to someone who either wants to play football in college, pursue an academic career? I know I admire student athletes highly because, to be honest with you, it seems like you all do a lot in terms of managing school well and also managing athletics well. Because even me, I've not really served as a student athlete in college, but you exercise, and after you finish exercising, you're tired and fatigued, so you normally put that at the end of your day. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to follow in your footsteps or follow in a like manner? What advice would you give them?
Well, I'd say look at the things that you really want to do and be the best in the world at them.
Okay.
And if it's something that you really want to do, you'll be naturally inclined to want to compete and want to do well in that. And then treat every single event like it's the Super Bowl. If it's a conversation with somebody, that's the most important conversation you're having that day. If you're walking past the janitor in the hallway, and you gotta give them the head nod and acknowledge them and say what's up, like acknowledge them like that's the only person you're gonna see all day. And what you'll see is there's a lot of moments that happen throughout your day that become excellent. And as soon as you start practicing that type of level of performance throughout your life, good things are bound to happen. I think, I can't plan how my future is going to go, but I think the Lord does give us the opportunity to have some agency as far as putting ourselves in the best position to receive those lessons.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's good. That's very good, Chase. I am so grateful I got the opportunity to chat with you today. Given all the work that you're doing, I'll be happy to do a publication with you, write something with you because we can really support science and sports together. But anyway, let's see how that plays out. Thank you again, Chase, for joining me today. Once again, this is New Student Pharmacist Podcast Experience. It is so good to have you listening today. Take care and all the best.
Okay, Joshua, it is so good to have you on the podcast today. Welcome to the New Student Pharmacist Podcast Experience. We're so glad to have you listening in today. Feel free to download this podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and a variety of other platforms. Here on this podcast, we discuss pharmacy ideas, research in chemistry, as well as successful student-athlete stories and successful entrepreneurs and their impact in society. We're happy you're tuning in. My guest today is Joshua Charles, CEO and founder at Frontier Dominion Limited. Joshua Charles is the founder and CEO of Frontier Dominion Limited, a dynamic global advisory firm committed to providing unparalleled expertise at the intersection of international geopolitics and business strategy. As the driving force behind Frontier Dominion Limited, Joshua leverages his profound grasp of research methodologies to empower clients in navigating the ever-changing global business landscape. As the leader of Frontier Dominion, Joshua Charles brings a diversity of experience and expertise to the role. He has a strong background in research and development, honed through his role to Constellation Energy Corporation, the Southern African Institute for Policy and Research, Climate Vault, and Cambridge Global Advisors. His adeptness in research, business development, and strategic acumen has been impactful in positively contributing to the success of diverse organizations. He holds a master's degree in public policy from the University of Chicago, where he was honored to have a Pearson Fellow. Formative years at Cornell University culminated in a Bachelor of Science in Interdisciplinary Studies, crowned by distinction in research. So Joshua, seems like you are doing well. So how are you doing today?
Oh, pushing along, David, and thank you so much for the warm invitation, man.
Yeah, just happy to have you. So, what drew you to specialize in the field of geopolitics and business strategy, considering your background in research and development? So, basically, to make this simple for like lay people, why do you have the interests that you have? What are your interests, and why are they those? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. And so for me, the way that I look at that question is I really look back at my experiences in life. And so I think I've really, throughout my career, I have really honed in on research. I think it's a fantastic way to expeditiously learn about the world. And so by conducting more research on topics such as international finance and institutional economics, I have been able to understand global dynamics, but this led me to be curious about how I can more practically support the corporate development, essentially the business development amidst global uncertainty. And so I see having a business that specializes in geopolitics and business strategy being a way that allows me to kill two birds with one stone in a really unique and exciting way.
Okay, so can you break it down? What's geopolitics and why is it important to the average person?
Yeah, so geopolitics is really the study of the changes in geographical locations throughout the world and how that intersects with politics and how that has been influenced with politics. So it's important to the day-to-day listener because they need to know what's happening around them for them to prosper and achieve their goals. They need to know what the government is providing to them. They need to know what challenges and roadblocks that their respective government may have in order for them to, say, maximize their benefits received. So there are different ways to look at it, but certainly if you are an entrepreneur, it's beneficial to know what's going on so you can see different opportunities. And it's so good to know from the angle of being a constituent and ensuring that your political leaders are acting in ways that are reflective of you and your interests at the end of the day.
Okay, so as we continue, I'll throw in a few popcorn questions. What do you do for fun, Joshua? What do you do for fun? How do you have fun?
For fun.
What do you do for fun? Or what do you do to pick it up with your friends? Or like, how do you have fun?
Yeah, so I think, it's important to find what works for you, especially as you're looking to find balance in your life. And so for me, I love to travel. It gives me an immense peace of mind. The last few years, I've been to different parts of the world, and it's also a way for me to learn about, just connect and learn more about the cultural nuances throughout the world. I love to lift weights, man, and I love to, partake in mixed martial arts. So I do a few things, but those are pretty much the main things that keep me busy outside of this.
Good. So, with that in mind, how do you keep balance for your work and life? How do you keep work-life integration? What do you do? As the founder and CEO of Frontier Dominion Limited, you went to University of Chicago, which is a venerable university in Chicago, venerated, highly admired, and I know I've heard of it in so many different ways. Of course, with Pritzker School of Medicine and stuff like that. But You've been to very good schools. You're currently a CEO of a business. How do you keep balance and work-life integration?
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, it's important for you to find what works for you. And so it's also beneficial for me at least to have a systematic way of going about my days as well as my weeks. So like I said, I work out a few times a week to mixed martial arts here and there. And so I know at this time in a day, on this day, I am working out. On this day, at this specific time, I am in mixed martial arts practice. On this day, on this time, I am maybe disconnecting, like usually on a Saturday evening or a Friday evening, spending time with friends and family. And so
Okay.
you have to find out what works for you. And so this is what I do to stay balanced.
Good. Sounds good. So finding the right professional environment is crucial. How do you find the good settings, or how do you find the environments for you to thrive in, whether that be the environment that you create for yourself or the university that you're attending? What process can you go through to find a good place for you to fit in or to thrive in?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And I think it really comes down to a few things. So I think it comes down to being open-minded. So I have engaged with a lot of different organizations with different managerial structures. And so from the vantage point of knowing what works for me, it has taken experience to learn that I like highly transparent and communicative work environments that are fast-paced. I also believe that it's important to move with curiosity and have a willingness to learn, but most importantly, you have to analyze the work environment that you're in. At the end of the day, it is beneficial to understand the dynamics of the workforce you're in, understand how your manager may work if you have one, to not only ensure that you are remaining respectful, but also you can find a way to show your manager that you are interested in the work that you're being assigned, because we all have to start from somewhere, and in doing so, they will likely feel more compelled to do a better job at helping you grow and ultimately help support the business objective for the organization that they're working at.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So how can you shed light on how you cultivate a sense of vision and consistently strong management within your firm? How do you keep vision? What do you do to keep perspective and keep insight into what you're trying to do within your firm? How do you keep vision and goals and the targets and objectives you alluded to earlier?
Yeah, so it's important to establish KPIs whether you are in the consulting industry or you are simply an entrepreneur or simply someone just looking to improve in life. And so you have to establish KPIs, or for those that don't know, key performance indicators that are appropriate for the space that you're looking to improve in. And so in the consulting industry, like for client stewardship, this may look like the frequency of engaging with potential clients. And personally, this may look like setting milestones that you would like to achieve in life, but actually spending time, right? You have to spend time to understand where you would like to go in life, personally as well as in the business sense or even professionally. And so by really identifying those milestones, those goals, and having that vision, you can align the actions you take on the daily to where you'd like to go in life. And I think that's ultimately how you get things done.
Okay, good, man, good. So, can you share any pivotal moments or decisions that significantly shaped your career trajectory in the field of public policy, politics, or even with your business? What story can you think about that, whether it be like fun time you have with your friends that really influence your perspective, or whether it be like a sporting event that you went to? What story could you share with the audience that really influenced your career trajectory, even your personal perspective?
Hmm. That's a great question, and what instantly comes to mind is when I went to Lusaka, Zambia for the first time.
Okay.
Prior to this trip, I did not have any international experience, and so in this capacity, I was interning for an organization called the African Forum, AfroDad, so the African Forum and Network on Debt and Development, and so spent some time digging into some fun public debt management policy research, and I think by being intentional with that experience, but like yes, you work, yes, I like to do work, but there was also a time to relax and play and
Oh yeah. Oh
and
yeah. Let's go.
I think David, I think that's how you roll too.
Yeah, of course, dude. You have to be able to have some fun, man. You have to be able to have some fun. Go
There
ahead.
we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely, by just assimilating myself in the culture, going out, meeting people who were from who were from Zambia,
Mhm.
and who actually understood. Okay, this is what you do in this setting. This is what you do in that setting. This is how you eat like this food and stuff like that.
Mhm.
That's really what allowed me to, or really convinced me to think more globally and expand my horizons to seek to cultivate solutions that are outside that, yes, are inclusive of issues going on in America, but transcend beyond borders. Really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I hear you, dude. Cultural competency sounds like what you're pointing to. It's like being able to like appreciate the culture change and operate and navigate appropriately so that you are inclusive, you're respectful, and you're also informed how you operate. That's good.
Yeah.
What role has mentorship played in your career? Can you name a few mentors or name someone who served as a really good mentor for you?
Mentorship has, without a doubt, changed my trajectory in life. And I think in life, you have to be willing, you have to have this willingness to learn. And so usually, my mentors in life, they're much older than I am, and they are able to give me advice on different pathways that I can take in life, some ideas that I might have, as well as just how I can be a better man, right? And so by gaining clarity and bouncing ideas back with different mentors of mine, this has been helpful for me in the shape of committing myself to geopolitics and business strategy as a way to increase my positive influence in the world. And so some mentors that come to mind instantly, one of my professors from Cornell University, John Hoppenott, he deals with essentially the economics of malnutrition and poverty and things like that. So a very dense topic, but he, as well as other people along the way, have supported me in ways that I cannot express enough gratitude. And so I think, especially not only as someone from perhaps an underrepresented background, it is really crucial to have those people saying, "Oh, you probably want to do that and not this," or "You probably want to go ahead and be patient and take a step back and do this when it makes more sense." So we all need that, man, and can benefit so much from doing that in our lives.
Completely agree with you. Getting advice on how to be a better professional or a better person. I completely agree with you. I have several mentors. I have listened to them before on the podcast. My parents, of course, Chancellor May, Dr. Manga, Dr. Dean Bayer. They've been really helpful to me. So, the reason why I asked that question was because I want to hear Like you mentioned some of mentorship. So how do you go about finding mentors? Because I know how I go about it, and I can share that as well. But people a lot of times mentorship emphasizes a key things for people to either access or pursue. So how do you go about it? Some people, like one of my previous guests, mentioned how you should take them out to lunch. For me, how I go about it is I email and I reach out. I find points of interest, people of similar career trajectories or a career trajectory that I'm trying to align myself with or be partner with. I try and find points where I can discuss with them so that I bring value to the space. I do my homework essentially. So how do you go about finding mentors? Because like in my opinion, yes, mentors may find you, and that's very serendipitous. Very that makes a really good movie scene, a really good movie. If someone comes
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but the reality is many times you have to go out and find them yourself. You have to do for yourself. So how do you go about finding them?
Yeah, and it's I essentially do what you do, man, which is I do the research. I look into I look into different subject experts that may align with one where I'm trying to go in life, but two, um, who may just have the experience of maybe not being, say, an entrepreneur or perhaps a politician, right? But someone who has that demonstrated track record of knowing what's what in a specific industry that I'm interested in. And I think like you gotta be intentional and conduct the outreach. You have to follow up with people 2 to 3 times in case they're not receptive to you, and just be patient. It takes time to get on people's calendars,
Yep.
especially as you start to really move up in life. So can't expect to like the point that I think you were alluding to, David, is you can't expect to receive that mentorship. We don't live in a perfect world, and if you're not doing the outreach and doing what you can to receive that help,
Mm-hmm.
very seldom is someone going to actually reach out to you, at least in my experience, and say, hey, I recognize your potential, let me help you out, let me mentor you. That's not how the world works, generally.
Yeah, generally that's not how it works. And I heard someone say, I was listening to them, and this might sound very this is will add a little bit more weight to what you're saying. Even though what you said has a lot of weight. We I'm all for the Disney movies. I'm all for them. All for the Disney movies, but the reality is, someone came for Cinderella, someone came for Snow White, someone came for all of the other characters. But the reality is in life, you have to show up for yourself. And you have to find support. Of course, thankfully I have a faith perspective, so I believe that I'm never in situations by myself or just with me and people. I believe there's a higher power. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. So that's my personal perspective. I'm never alone in whatever I face. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, how you want to phrase it. That's me. But reality is, practically speaking, you have to show up for yourself. That means you have to do the homework. I mean, you have to, and this is the thing I've realized. And we continue the conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
I've realized when you set a high standard for yourself, you're able to perform at that standard. People will hold you to that standard.
Right. Yeah.
People will hold you to that standard. So when you make a track record for yourself and you show that you can perform at a high standard, you cannot. Yes, you'll have make mistakes. Yes, you'll have days when you're a little bit off. You have to come back to center. But the reality is, you benefit and you enjoy the benefits of being at the high standard. So you have to continue to perform at the high standard.
Yeah.
You have to continue to perform. And that's something I have to remind myself of too. You set a standard for yourself. You're able to reach that standard. The goal now, the question now is not whether you can reach the standard, but how can I be consistent at reaching it?
I agree. I agree.
How can I be consistent? I enjoy doing X, Y, and Z. Enjoy doing certain things. How can I be consistent with making sure I do them well, I do them thoroughly? That may mean I'm gonna have to spend more time in the preparation phase. That may mean I have to slow down on the execution part. When it's time for me to actually do the task, I have to slow down to make sure that I'm hitting all the targets reaching my objectives, doing my goals. You get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, 100%, man. And let me just add this to what you're saying, and it's
Go
that
ahead. Go ahead. You
at the end of the day, we're focused on, or it's to level up in life. You have to remember, you have to bear in mind that your reputation is everything. And if you, to David's point, if you are performing, if you're known to perform at a high level, you will be expected to continuously do so for a very long time. For the rest of, your relationship with XYZ, yes, that might be uncomfortable. You might go through challenges in life, but at the end of the day, you will have so many doors open for you by this person, as well as the recognition that will come from the work that you produce. There are so many people who talk about you. If you are a high-performing individual, they look you up online. They look at you from far, and they monitor your progress. Some people, they might be wanting you to fail in life. Other people, they might be rooting for you. I often hear that if you don't have any haters, you're doing something wrong.
I hear what you're saying, but I can be honest with you. I'm glad you bring it up. Let's go to town on that one. I'm glad you. And this is the thing, when it comes to haters, however you want to pronounce it. I'm from Bahamas, so we say things a little differently, but they're never my focus. I'm aware of them. Mm-hmm. I'm aware of people who may potentially be oppositional. Let me phrase it in the more politically correct way. I'm speaking with the policy expert. I'm aware. I'm consciously aware of the opposition, of the progenitors of it, but they're never my focus, and that's not coming from a sense of hubris. It's coming from a sense of cockiness or a sense of condescension. But that's coming from the fact that I have a faith perspective, and that I'm never of the opinion or perspective or conviction rather that they are in control.
Yeah.
So if you are not in control, if you cannot influence my trajectory, and if you're just like a distraction in the environment, one of the things we learn in science is when we have a problem to solve, or if you have an objective to reach, you define the system.
Right.
And the system is the thing under observation. So in my opinion, they're not even in the system. The thing that's being observed, they're just extraneous. They're just like a spectating iron, if you will. They play no part.
I completely agree.
Yeah, dude, but yeah, I heard what you're saying, people, the reality is, we have this expression back home, dogs don't bark at parked cars.
Okay.
And what that means is they bark at the cars that are moving. People only come start to oppose you when they see you making progress in a specific direction.
Yeah. So, 100%, man, 100%. It's not to say that I personally, yes, you can be aware of people who, they speak to speak politically, who may have some clearly defined opposing points to you, right? But at the end of the day, they're not a priority. And I think too, another point, you have to recognize when it is success, when it will be helpful to leverage certain relationship dynamics in a way that is beneficial to you. So that can look like persuading people and things like that, which when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to getting things done, when it comes to being a pharmacist, all these things, and you're dealing with people, that is something that inherently will serve you well.
Yeah, and another way for us to put this, in a more PC way, is interpersonal personal conflicts. So conflicts that come about in relationships, and you have to really gauge that well. I'm not an expert at conflict resolution in any way, shape, or form, but what I can say is you have to know when to really hone in on self-care. You have to know when to reach out to people to really get the situation under control. But yeah, man, I'm glad you brought that up. So, what has been some beneficial advice that you have received or what has been some beneficial advice that what has been or what is some beneficial advice that you can give to people for pursuing a degree in public policy?
This is something that one of my mentors tells me again and again, and it's that you just got to go out there and see what you like, see what you don't like, try things out. You will learn through trial and error. I wouldn't say anything would be an error in that regard, and eventually something will click, which will serve as your guiding light in life. So you got to try things out. You know, I've done some work in nuclear energy. I've done some work in public health cessation policy. Done some work in agricultural economics. Some of these things did not stick with me. Some of them did, and you know, and then you keep it pushing.
Yeah, that's good, dude. And if you had more time, probably do another episode probably later on. But the reason why I mentioned that to you is because I wrote a paper on a situational analysis on how education can be a driving factor for economic development. So that'll be a good paper to hear you make some comments on. I'll probably send it to you after you finish. But yeah, dude. So what advice would you give to someone who sees your career path, who sees what you're doing, and they want to know they're just coming out of high school and they're just starting college? What advice would you give them as they're getting started? What key things, what practical tips would you give them, like in terms of like how they should prepare for things, or like how they plan their days so that they can do or continue in a trajectory that's similar to yours?
Yeah. So for me, it's really, or rather the people out there, aspiring professionals in the geopolitical and business strategy space. I think it's important to really spend time thinking about the impact that you would like to have in this world, in this lifetime, and do the research like David and I were mentioning earlier, do the research to seek out that mentorship. Well, one, understand the people who may align and be able to help you with your vision, but two, actually reach out to them and maintain these relationships throughout time. You really don't know what doors can open, and so if you are in high school thinking about even what college you would like to go to, really spend time thinking about where you'd like to go in life, and it's perfectly okay for that to be I would say idealistic to others, but to you, anything is possible in this life. And so even though others may believe that, okay, this person is thinking outlandishly, this person is crazy, if it makes sense to you at a given point in time, then it makes sense to you, and work from there as you have the guiding light, and recognize that, you know, in brief, where you are today or who you are today may not be who you are tomorrow. So if you are an aspiring professional, welcome changes, welcome the struggle, and welcome the growth that will come as you attain excellence.
Okay. Just give me 1 second. I want to get something to show in this episode.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, Joshua, we're back. So this is the reason why I went away. So yeah, along your point of people may think it's impossible, people may think it's outlandish, their perceptions may be of the disposition that are possible for you. But the reality is, you can do anything you put your mind to. You have the skills to do and that you're grace to do. Case in point, there's a textbook that I wrote, a science textbook that I wrote, school chemistry for everyone. This is a 514-page book, and 50% of the proceeds for this book, when integrated into different places, goes back, or it will go back as it's being integrated to the schools that integrate it. So 50% of the proceeds will go back. So how is it going to look? I started writing this book when I was 24. Now I'm 26 now. So you can't, another expression we have back home, you can't mind the noise in the market. You have to check the price of the fish. You have to focus.
I love that.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. You have to focus on what's important to you. You know, it's your life. Don't let no one take this from you. Make sure you own it. Own it.
Right. You know who else is gonna live life for us?
Who else gonna live your life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we are the ones who will steer the ship. We are the ones who will face the consequences of our actions if we don't take them, or if you do take them. Regardless of what you do, there will be
There'll be consequences.
of the input, there will be an output, whether it be more positive or negative, depending on your vantage point. It's just a matter. Just do what you know. It's your life. Do what you want at the end of the day.
And do what contributes to the overall good. And this is the thing, you know, steady state is only theoretical. You either accumulating or you consuming. You're either generating or you create. Steady state is a theoretical construct. And it rarely is it true in terms of how we're operating on a day-to-day basis. You're either moving forward or you are falling behind. But be encouraged, everyone. Glad to have you listening. Once again, this is the new Student Pharmacist Podcast. Thanks again, Joshua, for joining me today.
Thank you, David.
So, central dogma and its significance as it relates to metabolism. The central dogma, DNA. Let's go through the DNA. So, DNA is made up of nuclear bases. So we have adenine. So you draw it, and we're going to use Watson-Crick base pairing. This is adenine. We draw the ribose. We put the phosphate there, and then we use our little hydrogen bonds. We attach it to hydrogen bonded to thymine, which is a methylated uracil. Then we have it, and then we have the phosphate, and then from there we have this, which is another component, and we're drawing guanosine. And moving it right along, of course it's a little smushed, but we have this. So let me just adjust this. If we move the phosphate, put it like this, do it like this. So, and we have our double bond there. This is a cytidine. Triple hydrogen bonds, two hydrogen bonds between adenine and thymidine, and guanidine and cytidine, and we have DNA, and it goes from 3 to 5, and 5 to 3. So we have DNA here, and we also have our hydroxyls there. So that's DNA. So the only nuclear base that we are missing in this instance is uridine, which is basically going to be appreciate bond angles, which is that, and of course you just attach the ribose and the phosphate. So this is DNA. Moving right along, let's go to RNA. And RNA, I came up with a nifty way to code the codons, the 64 codons. So from DNA to RNA. So we have the structure of DNA. Now let's work through the codons. So uracil, cytidine, uracil, cytosine, adenine, guanosine. Go right down.
So I'm using the amino acid one letter abbreviations. F2, L2, L4, I3, start 4, V4, S4, P4, P4, A4, Y2, stop, 3, stop, 4, H2, Q2, N2, K2, D2, E2, and then moving right along, we have C2, stop, 3, W4, R4, S2, R2, G4. So what we have here are the one-letter abbreviations for all amino acids and their locations on the 64 codon chart. So writing this out, we have U, U, C, C. So writing this out. A, G, and G. So this is phenylalanine, leucine, isoleucine in those three positions. And then moving with this, we also have on this side here UCAG. So you kind of get the trend. So phenylalanine is UUU, phenylalanine UUU, phenylalanine UUC, also can be represented as UUC, and we have that from there. So keep that in mind. This is the representation using the 64 codons. So with that in our minds, you no longer have to write it. We can just go right along to the amino acids that make up protein. This is essential dogma in the canonical way. So we just put this on the side here. And we'll use it as we go through the amino acids. So with the amino acids, we have non-polar. So gavyl, pro, trip, methy, fen, glycine, alanine, valine, isoleucine, leucine, proline, tryptophan, methionine, and phenylalanine. So glycine, of course, the L-amino form, which amino acids are typically L-amino acid, is going to be one of my friends. Her name is Daj. So I'm like, hi Daj. The hydrogen is on the dash, and the R group is on the wedge, and then we have our carboxylate, and that's that, L-amino. So glycine. Now we're not going to draw these stereo-specific. That shows the stereochemistry. We're just going to draw them in the planar form. That's that. Glycine. Now, one of the things we're going to do as we go through this, as we write the corresponding amino acid, we're also going to think of how it will be represented using the 64 codons. So in this instance, right there, we know from our chart that was drawn previously that glycine would be in this position right here. So glycine would be in this section of the chart. We don't have to redraw the chart because we know the chart. So glycine is going to be GGU, GGC, GGA, and GGG. It's in the last corner of the 64 codon chart. So that's that. Glycine, alanine. We know what alanine